Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. Welcome to the Daily Conservative, where I look at political issues and I try to give you a conservative standpoint and try to help you combat any oppositions that you may have, or help you make up your mind on some of the things that you've been struggling to come with a position about. So today I'm going to be looking at trigger warnings and specifically the effect that they have on society and overall why debate is important between the political parties and why trigger warnings actually help desensitize people and help them be less able to understand and comprehend the different societal issues that people have. So in order to do this, I'm going to be referring back to two examples that we have pretty popular today in pop culture. It's Kathy Griffin and her picture with her holding the severed Donald Trump head, and then Greg Gianforte, who's a Montana person running for the House of Representatives, and what exactly are the different ramifications for what they've done and why this actually is not good for today's society. So, trigger warnings. Now, these typically are used by typically liberals, however conservatives can refer to them as well. It's this idea that people need to be warned when something that's negative pops up, and they need to have a warning ahead of time because they may react negatively to this. Now, this is usually used for people who may feel a certain connection to whatever's popping up. So, of course, if there's a problem with a certain ethnicity, then a picture of that ethnicity being beaten up might be considered a trigger warning. Now, this entire concept of trigger warnings stems back to the idea that the American people have been desensitized to a lot of the issues that are going on within the world, and therefore, in order to help them become more sensitized, in order for them to understand truly what's going on, they need to have a warning ahead of time so that they'll somehow be able to feel as though they don't have to be pulled into certain conversations. So there are positive ideas about why trigger warnings should be used. However, there's also one huge flaw within trigger warnings. But in order to discuss this, I'll look at the positive sides first. So trigger warnings, when people use them, it's typically to help people understand that something that's really negative might be coming up in a conversation. And now this entire concept of helping people understand something negative coming up is kind of flawed because, of course, people are going to face challenges in life, and if someone just gives them a trigger warning before they face everything, then they're not going to be ready for the real world where there are no essentially trigger warnings. It's just people having to live life. So this professor at NYU gives this at NYU School of Law gave this example of why trigger warnings can be a negative thing. So he says, if he were to take his class to the Bronx every day, and every time he passed by the Bronx, he would tell them, be careful, something happens in the Bronx. Eventually the class would grow suspicious of the Bronx. And this all stems back to them being warned of something happening in the Bronx. So when someone is warned of a possible trigger warning to, say, for example, the bombings going on in Palestine, they may feel more reactive to that than they originally would have if they just saw the pictures of what was going on. So giving people trigger warnings may seem like a good idea because it may seem like you're helping them from getting involved in the conversation, but eventually they're going to get involved anyway. So by trying to push them away from this path of being involved in this conversation, you're essentially telling them that they need to be wary of this conversation instead of getting actually involved and doing something about it. So now, going back to today's example of the entire concept of what's going on in politics today, we have the issue of Kathy Griffith's picture with her holding up the severed Donald Trump's head, and why this is an issue. It's not, when we look at this, people normally think, oh, she's threatening the president. But in reality, that most likely wasn't her intent with the picture. It was most likely just to show her disdain for the president. However, there's differences between what someone can be criminally charged with and what someone can be held responsible for. So, for example, if I were to yell profanities at the top of my lungs. I may not be criminally charged with it, but people may think that something's wrong with me because I'm choosing to do it. It's the same thing with Kathy Griffith choosing to show this example. When she chose to take this picture, she must have understood that she's held responsible for her actions. So even if she's not criminally charged with, say, threatening the president, she's still going to be held civilly liable for what she does. And because she chose to take this picture, she's going to be held responsible by both her employers and the American public, which is why this became such a big issue, because the American public had such a big outroar for her doing this. And this ultimately led to her being dismissed from CNN and her losing her sponsors. However, when we look back at the example of Greg Gianforte and what's going on with Montana, we have to understand that this is an entirely different issue. So this man who's running for the Republican House of Representatives actually body slammed a reporter. It's been reported that he body slammed a reporter once the reporter asked him about Medicare. Now, a lot of the people on the right have been saying that this is because of the leftists, what the left has been doing with essentially disgracing the name of conservatives and putting negative ads against these people. However, people have to understand that once he chose to make this decision, once he chose to body slam this reporter, he was infringing upon that man's rights of freedom of press. So you can't give a constitutional argument and you can't give a logical argument for why that man should have been allowed to body slam a reporter regardless of what party he belongs to. Now, thankfully, it's been reported that he's being charged with assault for this crime, so it's not going unnoticed. Okay, this is what we need to do. We need to hold people in politics responsible for the decisions that they make, regardless of what political party they belong to. If you're a Republican and a Republican makes a mistake, you have to hold them accountable because they're your elected officials. So, going back to today's whole topic of trigger warnings and what they have to do with society, when trigger warnings are introduced, it essentially tells people to be wary of a subject. Now, this is an issue because this person may not have felt that way before you gave them the trigger warning. However, by you giving them this trigger warning, now they're going to feel a different way about it. And today's issues with Kathy Griffith and Greg Gianforte, the entire concept of being held morally responsible and being held criminally responsible is still a huge issue. Because just because someone isn't criminally charged with something, just as what's happening with Greg Gianforte, he made the decision to body slam someone, he's being criminally charged. However, Kathy Griffith made the decision to take a picture with the severed head of Donald Trump while he was president and post it. She is held responsible to the same actions that she does, as Greg Gianforte is held responsible to the same actions that he does. Just because someone is an elected official doesn't mean that they're not held responsible for something. So, for example, I gave the example of me using profanity. I can do so. I can make the moral decision to use profanity at the top of my lungs. That doesn't mean that society is going to agree with that, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to be excluded from that just because I'm not an elected official. Alright guys, really broad topic today, but if you guys have any topics that you want me to do, leave a comment down below, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and if you guys want to start a debate with me, feel free. I'm open to it. I think one of the biggest issues that people have today within politics and within society is people are afraid to speak their mind. They're afraid of what others might think. However, we have to understand that we are the people who elect officials. We are the people that get things done. And if we're not opening this discussion of what we believe should be held within politics, then who will? Thank you. See you guys later.